Relax now, boys. The teller is here. Grab those reins. Give your horse a little tug. Slow him down. You guys are getting too far ahead of yourselves. You need to settle in right now. We got UFC 301 to talk about. And let's cut to the chase. I've seen people hating on this card. I'm not in agreement. I understand what some of you guys are saying as far as this being a pay-per-view card, maybe, you know, especially coming off the UFC 300 card, as far as that being the last pay-per-view card. It's not going to match up to that. But this is an exciting card, and I'm excited about it. Some of you guys may say there's not a lot of big star power. Well, let's not forget the King of Rio, Jose Aldo's making his return. I'm very excited about that. You guys know he is my favorite Brazilian mixed martial artist of all time. Okay, you guys know I love the flyweight division. You got Steve Erceg taking on Alexandre Pantoja. A lot of people feel that Erceg doesn't deserve this shot. Well, let's not forget that Alex Pereira got a title shot in his respective division after just fighting 3 times in the UFC as well, being on a 3-fight winning streak in the octagon, just like Steve Erceg. And I'll tell you what, man, this dude Steve Erceg may be a little bit. He may be a better fighter than a lot of you guys give him credit for. I think that he has some legitimate potential. We'll be talking a lot more about that fight. And other than that, the card is just, it's entertaining, man. Vitor Petrino has all the makings to be a star representing Brazil. He's very fun to watch. Michel Pereira, the high-flying Pereira, is always fun to watch. Paul Craig taking on Caio. Look at the preliminary fights. Joanderson, Brito. How about this dude, Myktybek Orolbai, who looked great in his UFC debut, taking on Elves Brener. We just seen Elves Brener shut down a fighter that had a lot of hype behind him in his last fight. That fight is going to be fireworks. Even towards the beginning of this card, man, you got one of the Bonfim brothers, Costa and Borjas. We'll get the card kicking off right away. I'm excited for this fight card. So before we jump into the first fight, I do want to say, I know some of you guys may be shocked as you guys look below. I have a new partner, all right? And this isn't going to bore you guys. Check this out. Stick with me here. I'm no longer working with Bovada. I am now partnered up with BetUS, and this is going to do wonders for the channel here. It's not going to just be boring advertisement coming your guys' way and whatnot. Working with them is going to allow me to give you guys a lot of exciting content coming up. Can't explain it to you guys right now, but you guys are going to see what I'm talking about very soon. And just so you know, there's a reason why I haven't been getting as much content out to you guys over the last couple weeks, and I've been getting these videos up a little bit later than I've wanted to. It's because I've been working on a lot of things behind the scenes, things that are going to make this channel a lot more exciting, okay? So these are things that I've had to be working on, and just stick with me and you guys will see what I'm talking about. I'm very excited to show you guys all that. And just, you know, real quick, if you guys take a look in my description, if any of you guys are looking to sign up for BetUS, you'll get a 125% match there. Please sign up through my link there. And that's all. So with that all being said, we're going to jump into the first fight. If you can, please smash the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. It means a lot to me, helps me out a lot. And I got my social media there below. You see my Twitter and my IG. And for that exciting content that I'm talking about, that I'm working on, you definitely want to be following me on those 2 platforms, because that's where a lot of it will be coming your way as well. All right, guys, let's go jump into the first fight.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
Of course, this card is headlined by a flyweight matchup. The division also kicks the card off. We got Alessandro Costa taking on Kevin Borjas, 2 younger, promising fighters that have shown us they have skills to be deserving of fighting in the octagon. Now they've taken some losses, of course, but it's been against solid talent. First off, in the case of Costa, take a look at the 2 fighters that he took L's to. Steve Erceg, who's fighting for the title here at the top of this card. And then in his UFC debut, he lost to Amir Albalzi. Albalzi is currently ranked number 3 in the division, and he's on a hell of a win streak. So just understand that Costa had his one victory over Jimmy Flick, went in there and did what he should have done, finished him up. Jimmy Flick, a fighter that's dabbled with retirement and whatnot, you know, he's not on the level, but I like the way that Costa went in there and finished him up. So now, one thing that I will say kind of points towards Borjas' direction as I break down tape on them and as I'm familiar with these fighters is that I think that Borjas should have a little bit of an edge as far as the volume goes. The numbers point that way as well, landing 5.4 strikes per minute compared to Costa's 3.75. when you watch Costa fight, he does seem to look for the power shots a little bit more so. He's looking to kind of take your head off. While on the other hand, Borjas is light on his feet and he's mixing things up, throws nice leg kicks as well. And I think that could favor Borjas if we go to the judges' scorecards. But then again, you do have to take into consideration that this fight is taking place in Brazil. First fight of the event. The crowd's going to be getting excited out there. I'm expecting this stadium to be filled up from the very first fight. It's not like the U.S. And if it does go to the judges' scorecards, then you do have to take into account for all of these fights that the Brazilian fighters may have a little edge there, a little help there, if you will. But just breaking down the tape, I kind of like Borjas if this fight goes to a decision. Costa may have a little bit more of an ability to finish a fight. He's shown that he's dangerous and he's a fight finisher, but you could kind of say the same thing for Borjas. I think Borjas has some of that fight ending ability. And then on the other hand, you also mix into account that Costa has been finished, right? We saw Albalzi finish him in his UFC debut via strikes. Albalzi is not a fighter that has typically done that throughout his career. He's not a fighter that's going out there knocking dudes out left and right. So we've seen that Costa is a little bit more vulnerable defensively, as you see him over here with his training partner who's been on an absolute tear, Diego Lopez. But just again, we have seen that Costa is a little bit more vulnerable defensively because you can't really say that for Borjas. Borjas, as far as his durability from strikes, this is a fighter that's never been finished yet. He took a lot of damage against Joshua Van, which we have to highlight that fight. He was up at one point in time in that fight, and then Van made a little bit of a comeback late in that fight. And his only finish for Borjas, his only finish was a fight where he was submitted, and that was against a respectable opponent. And I believe it was Renzo Mendes, I think, if I remember correctly, who has a pretty solid resume there. He was sub there. Costa has some jiu-jitsu skills, I do believe, as well, with 6 of his 13 victories coming by way of sub. But he hasn't really been showcasing that type of threat in the cage right now, and that's something that could come into play. But let's also just mention the fact that on Dana White's Contender Series, where Kevin Borjas got the victory over Victor Diaz. Victor Diaz is a fighter that gets a lot of respect over at American Top Team. Okay, this is a fighter that has a major BJJ pedigree. Okay, that's his bread and butter. Okay, if you guys don't really know too much about Victor Diaz, you could look him up. And remember, he was a big favorite coming into that fight there. And Kevin Borjas weathered the storm from him early with that grappling threat coming his way, and eventually was stuffing takedowns and implementing his will there. Okay, so I think that Victor Diaz is probably a better grappler than Costa. So, that kind of leans me towards the Kevin Borjas pick here. I think he avoids any type of grappling threat. I think he can handle that. And I think that Borjas is going to get the better of the striking. I think he's going to edge out Costa with the striking. Now, I don't say this with an overwhelming amount of confidence, but I like Borjas here. I like what I've seen from him. To circle back to the work that Borjas did against Joshua Van, like I said, he was up at one point in time in that fight, and that's not something to take lightly, because I have Joshua Van as one of the top up-and-comers in this division, and there's so many up-and-coming fighters in this division. It's ridiculous. Sometimes I forgot to kind of praise Joshua Van because he is a phenomenal fighter, and Borjas held his own in that fight, even though he slowed down towards the end of it. Didn't get finished, showed that durability like we talked about. And as we take a look at the betting line, Kevin Borjas opening up as a +120 on BetUS as an underdog, touched even odds, but then it dips back the other way. He's currently a +115 underdog. I think the value is on Borjas. I'm going to side with the judges making the correct decision here, that's really, that's a tough statement to say there, to trust the judges. But I'm going to say that Borjas rightfully deserves to get this decision victory in this fight, and that the judges will do the right thing here. But again, that is something you can't really always trust in. The judges can easily be influenced by the crowd here. Costa can have his little moments where he lands some big shots at times, but I like Borjas' high guard. I think he should be able to avoid anything that's too threatening there. And I will say that Borjas wins a decision. If I see a finish in this fight, if I do see a finish coming, I'm actually going to say that Borjas cracks Costa, and Costa kind of crumbles a little bit like he did in the Albalzi fight. So we'll see how that plays out, but give me the dog to kick the card off in Kevin Borjas. I like what I've seen from him. Of course, we have one of the Bonfim brothers on a Rio de Janeiro card, Ismael Bonfim, taking on Vinc Pichel. Ismael Bonfim definitely has redemption in his eyes here, as he's coming off a tough loss. If you guys remember, he was finished up there in the first round against Benoit Saint-Denis, who is a fighter that we are all understanding now as a very high caliber opponent. Even though he just took that L to Poirier, we still understand that was a tough battle there for Bonfim. So don't turn your back on Bonfim, man. He's still very, very talented, as is his brother Gabriel Bonfim, who I'm a little bit higher on. Now, Ismael's fight before that L was a phenomenal knockout finish of Terrence McKinney. Of course, he had the victory on Dana White's Contender Series as well against Abasov. And I still am high on him. Like I said, 28 years old. I think that this is a fighter that will be representing Brazil in the octagon for a long time to come. Vinc Pichel, 41 years old. He's way up there in age. Doesn't have a lot of mileage on him, though. Just 17 professional fights throughout all these years. Fought on the Ultimate Fighter way back in the day. And, averaging almost like a fight per year for such a long period of time. So I think that his body will hold up. But this is a bad stylistic matchup for him. I think that Bonfim is going to be moving a lot quicker in there. I think that Bonfim will be ahead of him everywhere this fight goes. Vinc Pichel, like I said, though, he is a very well-rounded fighter. But if he wants to look to go down to the mat, Bonfim has very dangerous Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. On the feet, Bonfim's going to be striker. He has the edge as far as the striking goes. I do like Ismael here to get the job done. And another thing, too, is that Vinc Pichel hasn't been a fighter that's really the most dangerous to get a finish on you, right? To catch you slipping, right? And in a case like this, you would kind of think that Bonfim kind of has to make a big error in this fight and eventually get finished. But Vinc Pichel hasn't had a finish dating all the way back. He hasn't had a finish all the way since 2017, which that was against Damian Brown, a fighter that wasn't hanging around in the octagon that long. So I just don't see Vinc Pichel getting that finish. This isn't Benoit Saint Denis, right? And Vinc Pichel. So yeah, Vinc Pichel does have potential to hang around in this fight and for this fight to go to the judges' scorecards. But don't be surprised also if Bonfim finds a submission down on the mat. I think there might be a high pace pushed in this fight, and Bonfim may have an opportunity to get a finish here, whether that's cracking Pichel with the big shot or eventually getting this fight down to the mat in some type of scramble scenario where he locks in a submission. And we have seen Vinc subbed recently as well. He's not he's not a guy that's impossible to submit. We've seen him finish in 2 of his last 3 fights. In fact, Gilbert Gillespie, I believe he caught him with an arm triangle choke in that fight. Rustam Khabilov knocked him out. That was way back in the day as well, in 2012. But still, you mix into the fact that Vinc Pichel's 41 years old and that finish could be coming. But probably edge Bonfim to get a decision victory here, as Pichel's been decently durable. But don't be surprised if Bonfim gets that finish there. And let's go take a look at the betting line. Ismael Bonfim opened up on BetUS as a -400. He's now a -500. It's a very steep line. I personally would advise against touching this line. I think that it's too high. Vinc Pichel isn't necessarily amazing at any one particular skill set, but he's a well-rounded fighter. And if Ismael lets the moment get to him and he goes out there and he's headhunting and he's looking to get that early finish and he doesn't, you may see him slow down, start breathing heavily, and Pichel will be there. He will be in his face, and maybe Pichel has his moments and takes over this fight, or with the way that Bonfim was just finished, maybe Vinc Pichel is able to have a big moment in this fight and get a finish. So it's not worth the betting line in my opinion. So I would advise against staying next to this, but I do like Ismael Bonfim to get back into the win column. And Vinc Pichel, with the age that he's at and the inactivity, I don't even know if he gets another fight in the octagon, as that may be the case with a couple other fighters we'll be talking about. There could be a changing of the guard from the last card into this card. There's some aged fighters that we may be seeing for the last time in the octagon.
BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
In the women's flyweight division, we have a matchup of 2 fighters who are coming off this recent Dana White's Contender Series season, in Dione Barbosa and Ernesta Kareckaite. I would say there's a little bit of a stylistic clash here. Kind of a grappler versus striker, but maybe that's not completely the case, because Barbosa has Olympic caliber judo skills. She's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. We saw those skills on display on her fight on DWCS, where she snatched up a nasty armbar. But really, when you do break down tape on her, her striking is coming around, and we know that she's putting in work over at King's MMA with Rafael Cordeiro, who's one of the better striking coaches in the game throughout the years. So you know her striking is just going to continue to grow. I think that Barbosa really has some potential to be a very well-rounded fighter. But let's not forget, though, the grappling base is serious, and Ernesta is a fighter that we need to see more from her as far as her grappling skills go, right? She's a fighter that came into MMA with more of a striking background. She's had some pro and kickboxing professional matches. In her fight on Dana White's Contender Series, if you guys follow me on IG, I did a little post about it. She ended up seeing it, sharing it, and following me. So I got a little soft spot for Ernesta there, especially for the performance that she put on that show. And basically the post that I put together was stating that the fight that she had on that episode was the most phenomenal and the best fight that we've ever seen, best female fight we've ever seen on DWCS. It was absolutely ridiculous. That was against Carly Judas, who took that fight on short notice, but that's a fighter that has some good potential. She only had 3 professional fights going in that fight, but people are high on Carly. She's a real athlete. And let me also say, right after that fight, the next fight was Danny Silva versus Angel Pacheco, which I then stated was the most amazing fight I've ever seen on Dana White's Contender Series. The odds of those fights being back-to-back and being the 2 best fights I've ever seen from the women's side of things and the men's side of things, that was crazy. If you guys remember that episode, it was nuts. All right. So, but you know, back to the debut of both these fighters. I really like Ernesta's striking. I like the length she has. She doesn't really fight long though. She kind of closes the distance and looks to slug it out, which I don't necessarily like, especially in a spot like this. I think this is a fight that she wants to keep standing and really should look to keep her range and try to strike from the outside. I just have a hard time seeing that being the case for some reason. I think that they're going to be clinched up a lot. Ernesta just kind of crashes in, and Barbosa's going to enjoy that type of fight where she's going to use her judo skills. I think Barbosa is going to get this fight down to the mat. I think that Barbosa is a step up compared to the fighters that Ernesta has been fighting. And I think that Barbosa is going to be very live to pull off a sub. In fact, I think she finds a sub in this fight with her grappling skills. Also, just note, if you guys are wondering, yes, she did take 2 losses in the mix of her limited amount of professional fights, but look at the level of competition here. Has a victory over Kadini Silva, who was an official play of mine in this last weekend's card, which we cashed on. Had a victory over Kadini, who's phenomenal. She had a knockout loss to Josiane Nunez, who you guys know I am high on, even though she just lost a fight she should have won. And then she has a loss to Jenna Bishop. Jenna Bishop is going to be taking on Taylor Santos over in the PFL, and she's undefeated. She's a very promising fighter as well. So she's been battling against higher level competition compared to Ernesta. I'm just going to circle back to the grappling skills. I think the grappling edge is going to be too much. I think they're going to crash. We'll play devil's advocate here. If Ernesta is going to pull this fight off, she needs to use her footwork, needs to avoid clashing and getting on the inside, needs to strike from the outside. She could potentially have that striking advantage and she could outpoint Barbosa, but it's going to be a tough test for her. I like Barbosa here to find that sub. So I like Kareckaite, but I just have a feeling it's not going to go her way here. We take a look at the betting line, where we're going to see that Barbosa is a minus 215 right now. She opened up as a minus 145 on BetUS on April 17th. So this line has had some time to marinate, and we've seen a lot of action coming in on Barbosa throughout all sports books. I think people are kind of eyeing this fight to play out similarly than what I see happening. We see the grappling being a problem. Take a look at any type of props on a sub. That could be something that you're going to want to target potentially. Let's see what kind of line we're getting on a Barbosa submission victory here. Barbosa to win inside the distance is at plus 200. If you want to target the specific submission prop, plus 215. So I think you're actually better off going with the inside the distance at that point, because you never know if she uses her grappling to kind of ground and pound her. I mean, you're not talking about a major difference in line. Plus 275 is where this line opened, and we've seen some action coming in on Barbosa there for that submission. You might have wanted to grab that plus 275 there on the sub. So that's something to keep in mind there. That is how I see this fight playing out. I have Barbosa, the high caliber grappler, getting the sub on Kareckaite. Up next, we got Mauricio Ruffy taking on Jamie Mullarkey. Huffy, you know, I desperately want to call him Ruffy, but we can't do that. You guys are always giving me hell about my pronunciation, so I got to put that Brazilian, that Portuguese kind of accent on it. Mauricio Ruffy had a hell of a performance on Dana White's Contender Series, had a comeback knockout victory over a very high caliber opponent in Raymond Magomedalayev. Raymond, if you remember, he went to a split decision against the very talented Impa Kasingane. That was over at Eagle FC. That's that promotion that Khabib started up. So just understand that he is a high caliber fighter. Victory over Anthony Njokuani before that. I think that Raymond is a talented dude. And that was a fight where Mauricio had to dig deep. He had to come back and get that third round finish. Otherwise, he would have taken an L on the scorecards. And he only had about 15 seconds left to do it by the time he had to finish. Two of the judges did have Mauricio down in that spot there. But all in all, I did like how he looked, especially standing. I think he's a danger striker. Training out of the Fighting Nerds, the Fighting Nerds gym team over there. Those guys have been really putting in some work. Two of his teammates will be fighting on this card. Of course, Kaio, and then there's another fighter who's coming off Dana White's Contender Series. We'll be talking about him in a minute. But all three of these fighters training together, training for this date. I think that is a big deal. Also take note, I don't think I mentioned, the fight that he had on Dana White's Contender Series was up in the welterweight division as well. Fighting a high caliber fighter up there in the welterweight division. So he's dropping down to the lightweight division here, taking on Jamie Mullarkey. And Jamie Mullarkey, you know, you see these strikes that Mauricio is landing, and Jamie Mullarkey is not going to want to take any of these because these type of strikes can easily finish him up. Mullarkey is a fighter, just 29 years old, but he's been taking some damage, and he's been getting finished in his losses as of recently. And throughout his career, I mean, you could say throughout his career, I believe he was finished in 5 of his 7 losses. And his last, you take a look at his last 2 losses, which were in 2 of his last 3 fights, getting knocked out by Muhammad Naimov and Nasrat Hakparast. So, you know, coming off that knockout loss in the first round, I do question. And then also finished by Jalen Turner. Let's not forget that too. Finished by Jalen Turner in his third. So his last 3 losses, he was finished. Okay, so I do worry that for Mullarkey's sake, that he's not going to hold up here. I think this dude Mauricio is going to be throwing heat his way. I like his striking. I think that he's going to have if he does the weight cut properly, comes into this fight in the right way physically, I think that his frame is going to be a problem for this division. He's going to have a nice frame here. He needs to continue sharpening up his overall skill set, of course, has to have the takedown defense on point. We've seen Jamie Mullarkey go out there and try to stifle guys that are lacking in that department. We saw him do that recently to Francisco Prado, who's a very young and raw talent who's already in the UFC. So he's so young, but such a fun fighter as far as his striking goes. But Prado was in over his head and couldn't stuff the takedowns. And we saw Mullarkey being willing to just go for those spam type takedowns, and he'll push the pace with the takedowns. If you stuff 1 or 2, that doesn't matter. He'll keep coming for those. And that's one method of victory I could say that could be, if Mullarkey gets the job done, that's one way he could potentially pull it off. I do have to note also, Jamie Mullarkey does have some pop in his strikes. He is somewhat of a knockout artist. We've seen him have some big knockouts throughout his career. I mean, out of his 17 victories, 10 of them have come by way of knockout. And we have seen Mauricio Ruffy knocked out before. His lone loss was a knockout loss that he took back in 2019 against Emmanuel Souza. He was knocked out in the second round. So let's not completely overlook the fact that Mullarkey does have some pop in his hands. All in all, I got to go at Mauricio here. I just think that Mauricio is just going to be hitting on all cylinders, and I like what I've seen from him on tape, and Mullarkey's durability is a question mark for me. Okay, so I do like the UFC newcomer here. Of course, he will have the crowd behind him. He is currently a -160 favorite. This is on Bet Any Sports. Let's go take a look at Bet US. He's a -165. We're seeing him as high as a -170 on old sports books like Bovada, who I've since turned my back on, you guys know. But, you could potentially argue that the line's a little high on a fighter that needs to prove a little bit more and making the weight cut. Let's see. We might want to see how he's going to look and how his body's going to hold up. You could potentially argue that, especially because Mullarkey is a tough veteran. He's still only 29 years old. But that also being said, if you have to pick a spot here, I would still say there's more value even on the high line on Mauricio. I'd rather be on the Mauricio side, even at the -170. I feel that he's going to get the job done here, and I'm not even looking to target dog odds on Mullarkey in this spot. And you might want to take a look at a Mauricio, maybe an under 1.5 on the fight at plus odds. You might want to look at a Mauricio Ruffy winning inside the distance or a knockout, but at the same time, the line is not really where I would like it. I see him right around a -130 to get a knockout. I'm not crazy about taking knockout prop or specific method of victory bets and minus type of odds. To be honest, I like to have plus odds no matter really who's fighting, but depending, of course. But I don't like the value I see on the board there right now. So I just see Huffy getting the job done one way or another, and maybe you're targeting that money line. We stay put in the lightweight division. We have Joaquim Silva taking on Drakkar Klose. Both these fighters at the midway of their 30s are over the midway, right? Drakkar Klose, 36 years old, Silva, 35. It's kind of crazy to think. Both fighters similar to Vinc Pichel, who we talked about earlier, in the sense that they haven't been the most active fighters throughout the length of their careers, right? I mean, we're talking about Klose with 17 pro fights. I think Pichel was right around the same mark. Silva at 17 professional fights. That's not really a lot of fights for a career, as they're kind of tailing towards the end of their careers, whether they like that or not. I mean, it is what it is. This is a young man's game. But both fighters have a decent name for themselves in the game. All right, they've been putting in work. Joaquim Silva, he's been on the losing end and lost in devastating fashion quite a couple of times, right? Got knocked out by Ricky Glenn within seconds. Was just starched by Arman Sarukian in the third. You take a look at his victories also. I would say for the most part, they've been lower level victories against an old Guida, Jesse Ronson coming off failed drug test and whatnot. The biggest victory of his career was without a doubt the finish over Jared Gordon, victory over Reza Madadi. If you remember him with the wrestling base coming into MMA. Andrew Holbrook, a fighter that had a little O next to his loss number there for a while. If you remember, he was undefeated early on in his career, but that didn't last that long. But Silva has the nickname BJJ intertwined in it, and that's not his fighting style, to say the least. This is a striker. This is a guy that, if he's going to get the job done here, I think he's going to have to clip Drakkar Klose and get a knockout. Drakkar Klose is a very measured fighter. He's very solid defensively. He knows how to close the distance and clinch up when he needs to. He'll control you against the cage. His striking has came around over the years. Throws nice calf kicks. Training out of the MMA lab. He's a very refined fighter. Just knocked out Joe Selecki. Slammed Joe Selecki, if you remember that. That was that card where there was 2 crazy slams on the same card. Had a decision victory over Rafa Garcia. I hold that victory in high regards. I think Rafa Garcia is a good fighter. Knocked out Brandon Jenkins, a lower level fighter, but doing what he should have done. And then the knockout he had against Beneil Dariush. If you guys remember, that was a fight that he could have easily had the knockout himself. And if that would have played out like that, I mean, he would have been on a hell of a win streak. All right. So he clipped Dariush. They were brawling out and he got clipped. And he eventually was finished there in the second round. But Drakkar Klose is a good fighter. And I believe his wife is Courtney Casey, right? Also a fighter that we haven't seen fighting these days, but even though she took a lot of losses, she was always fun to watch. And this fight should be a good one. All in all, I'll say the deciding factor for me, which leans me towards Klose, is that Klose is a more defensively sound fighter, more durable fighter, I would say, too, over the long haul. You take a look at the numbers. Drakkar Klose landing at a higher mark throughout his career at 4.33 compared to the 3.61 mark of Silva. Also only absorbing 3.4 strikes per minute, while Silva has absorbed 4.51. And then those numbers do play out when you watch the tape. Klose, I think, will be the more measured fighter here, and I would prefer to be on the Klose side, regardless if this fight is in the home country of Silva. I just think that Klose is the overall better fighter here, and I like being on that side. Now, as far as does he get a decision or a finish, that's a tough one there, because it really depends on the type of style that Klose is gonna try to implement. If he's gonna play it safer, I think he still can control this fight. If he really wants to let this fight play out in an entertaining type of way, and he wants to go balls to the wall, similarly to the Dariush fight, he may get that knockout, but he could potentially be clipped in his own right as well. Silva has power. So, with Klose going out there and getting that finish over Selecki and getting really 2 knockouts in his last 3 victories, he might come into this fight a little overly confident. That's something you do have to watch out for. He might be hunting for that knockout again, feeling like he could, replicate what he's been doing, and he really wants to make a buzz on a big card like this, a pay-per-view card, so he could try to make a run in this division, which is what all these fighters want to do. He's 36 years old. He knows the time is now. He may step on the gas here a little bit. He may look to make some noise here. So maybe we do see this fight play out a little bit more excitingly than some people think it will. Maybe we see one of these fighters get that finish, whether Klose is overzealous in there and gets clipped, or he gets his own knockout. So keep an eye on that. All in all, though, I like being on the close side of things with the money line. Now, he has touched -200. That's a little high. -160, I do like the value there. Really, even where it opened up at -185 and down, I still like being on the close side of things. I just think that he has proven to be a more consistent UFC fighter, and I think that he shows up and he gets the job done here. In the featherweight division, we have 2 promising prospects here. Gene Silva, who was the fighter I was referring to before, also training with the Fighting Nerds, one of the 3 fighters that are fighting on this card, taking on William Gomis, who is a fighter that has impressed me very much so in the limited amount of action we've seen him in the octagon. Just 26 years old. I like the way he moves out there. You can also raise the stock of that victory that he had over Jarno Arens, which Jarno Arens, you guys know I was saying this going into his last fight. I picked him to win that fight. I believe he was an underdog, but he was having a tough time getting that W in the octagon, but he was facing against high-level talent or good, solid-level talent, and I still believe that Jarno Arens passed the eye test when he was in there. So I do believe that the victory that Gomis had over him there, you can put a little bit more stock into that. That was in his UFC debut. After that, bounces back with another victory over Francis Marshall, who I believe was undefeated at the time. Just the way that he looked in that fight was really good, and then had a 3rd-round finish there over Yanis in that last spot. So he's looking good, training out of the MMA factory in Paris, France. I like his movement in there. Gene Silva, without a doubt, a fight finisher. This is a guy that goes out there and looks to get his opponent out of there. Now, wasn't able to do that against Kevin Vallejos there on Dana White's Contender Series. Went to a decision, but you see that he has the power. In his UFC debut, he knocks out Weston Wilson. But let's be very clear, Weston Wilson, I've said this and I'll repeat it, Weston Wilson was a fighter that should have never been signed to the UFC. He's not a UFC caliber fighter. We all knew that going into his debut. We all knew that. Okay, so you take a look at his resume, you take a look at his tape, and Gene Silva, let's see again. Gene Silva got the finish there. It seemed like it took a long time. It's crazy. It was in the first round, but it took 4 minutes. If you remember, that fight seemed like it was playing out a little bit longer than a lot of us expected to. We all thought Silva was just going to walk across the cage and starch him, but he did get the knockout. But still, Weston Wilson and William Gomis are 2 different fighters. Okay, William Gomis is going to be a lot harder to hit. We've seen that from him. I mean, this guy's only absorbing 1.49 strikes per minute in the octagon. He's very sound defensively. Now, he's not really the most active fighter. He's been fighting more of a defensive type of style in the octagon and throughout his career, but he can make that play out for him in this fight. It play out in a good way for him here. I do believe that. If Silva gets caught up headhunting here, there could be a problem. Maybe Silva just kind of outpoints him and looks smooth throughout this fight. I could see this fight playing out relatively closely, but at the same time, no matter how I spin it, I do like being on the William Gomis side of things. I do. I don't know. I just something about this kid I like, and we'll get to the odds in a second because he is an underdog. But he's never been knocked out. I know that Silva has knocked out 9. In 12 of his victories, he has had 9 knockouts there. So 75% of his victories have come by way of knockout. That is obviously a threat that he brings into the cage. But Gomis has never been finished. He's sound defensively, like we said. I think he could avoid that big shot. We could see this fight play out. And I think there's potential that Gomis can win a decision here. Silva's never been finished also, 2 decision losses. But Gomis has 7 knockout victories. Also has 1 little submission victory there. I don't really see a submission coming, but you never know. Anybody can get clipped here. Gomis is quick. And I favor a decision victory for Gomis, maybe a split decision victory for him. Maybe we all kind of see that he should have got the job done, but with the Brazilian crowd going crazy for Silva, maybe it plays out even closer. So again, that's something that you do have to take into consideration. But I got to stick with my gut here. I got to. I'll be really annoyed if I just pick Silva here, because I think that the crowd's going to play into effect when we go to the scorecards. But I like what I've seen from Gomis, and I'm going to stick with that pick. Okay, I am. So it's a very close fight. Don't say it with a lot of confidence. Let me warn you guys now. And there's potential that Silva goes out there and gets the job done. But Gomis opening up at even odds, touches minus 135 there for a little bit. We've seen action coming in him. He's going back and forth, and right now he is a plus 135 or plus 125 underdog. So I think there's more value on Gomis. I'm a little skeptical, though, with the judges, man, on this event taking place in Brazil. I am not going to lie. It makes me a little skeptical. If this fight was playing out on neutral turf, I would feel more comfortable taking Gomis. But I'm just going to make this decision based off the tape I'm watching and what I'm seeing, and I'm going to stick with that. So give me William Gomis via decision. This fight is definitely marked down to be one of the most exciting fights on the card, if not the most exciting. Elves Brener taking on Myktybek Orolbai. Elves Brener, first and foremost, this dude is just always involved in an exciting fight. He always rises to the occasion, at least in the latter half of his career, and since he's been mixed up with the UFC, which means more than anything. He did have a little skid where he was taking some losses. Understand that he was still very young, and I think that those losses that he took back from like 2019 to 2020, which you also note one of those losses to Gabriel Santos, a very, very talented fighter, who's 0-2, I believe, now in the UFC, but really should be 2-0. Some tough luck here and there, but so a high-level fighter there. But just understand, since those losses, man, he has really got things going. Of course, was an underdog in his first two UFC fights, and he just rose to the occasion, defeated Zabira Tukigov, and then he went out there and defeated Guram Kutiladze, who was a massive favorite in that spot there. He weathered the storm, was never down and out. He has a humongous cranium. He can eat shots, and if you gas out, he's going to keep coming, and he'll finish you up. Okay, so that is something that you have to take note of in a matchup like this, because I do believe that Orolbai is going to be pressuring him. He's going to have success with his wrestling, but the big question mark is Orolbai going to be able to continue that pace with the takedowns and just pushing the pace on Brener? Because if he starts to tire out, if Brener continues to make him work, we could potentially see Orolbai breathing heavily, and we could see Elves Brener using his Muay Thai skills, which are dangerous. Of course, a shootbox product. You guys know what type of fighter he is. He's well-rounded. He's dangerous, and he's a fight finisher. But do note, out of his 16 victories, even though he has good striking skills, 10 of his victories coming by way of submission. All right, Orolbai, one lone loss against an undefeated fighter, who's still undefeated, and really shows to have some promise there, and it was a decision loss. So we got to note the performance that Orolbai just put on in his UFC debut against Uros Medic, who Medic just looked phenomenal this past weekend with the knockout over Tim Means. Now, do note, we heard Medic say in the octagon that he was, which we knew, he was training for a different opponent. Orolbai took that fight, stepped in on short notice, and Medic was strictly training Muay Thai for his initial matchup, okay, because it was against a striking-based opponent. So are we putting too much stock into the performance that Orolbai put out there, just the way that he was just kind of ragdolling Medic and then pulled off that sub? Maybe we're putting a little bit too much stock in that performance. I mean, if you want to kind of buy into what Medic was saying, but it was kind of impressive the way that he was kind of ragdolling Medic there and pulling off that sub. I am more on the side of believing that Orolbai is the truth. I do. I believe that this is a fighter that is going to continue to rise to the occasion. We could talk about his wrestling skills and his grappling skills, but let's also note his striking is not bad at all. He shows to have some serious power. If you want to pull up the tape of his second and most recent fight the first fight before he came into the UFC, the most recent fight before he came into the UFC, which was a devastating knockout victory over Hayward Charles. I mean, that was a fun knockout to watch. Beautiful uppercut as he came in from the side. Beautiful footwork setting up that uppercut. But also note that Hayward Charles is a fighter that almost has a 500 record. Okay, you have to note these things. We're turning over every stone here. But again, I'm going to say I am on the side of this dude Orolbai being a legitimate prospect, a serious prospect, a fighter that is going to hold his own in the octagon for some time to come. He's going to string off a nice winning streak, and we'll see how far he could push it. I could see him breaking into the top 15. He passes the eye test to me. And for all you people that were saying, that he's a caveman or he's from the ancient times, you've seen some of those funny little memes that had him matched up with Clay Guida, and they said the fight was taking place in 500 BC or whatever, way back 1000, 2000 BC. Look at him cleaned up over here with the nice little polo and the shoes, man. The fresh cut. Get off my boy there. All right. So, again, I want to say I think that he is going to rise to the occasion. I think that he's going to continue to prove to be a promising fighter. Just 26 years old. Elvis, 26 years old as well. Both these fighters have so much potential. I think that the winner of this is going to be a fighter that we're really keeping an eye on, and even the loser as well. They'll bounce back, okay? Orolbai with a 2-inch reach advantage here. Nice little frame for the division. I think that the wrestling of Orolbai will pay dividends, and it'll help him take the decision victory here. All right, I think he gets a decision victory. I don't think he finds the finish over Brener. Brenner's never been finished. He's a durable dude. I don't think that Orolbai gasses out similarly to what happened with Guram, where Guram was really landing those big shots, hurting him and pushing the pace and then kind of gassing out. Okay, I think that Orolbai has the tape on that fight to kind of to go off of. I think that he'll have a little bit of a heads up not to go balls to the wall and look for that finish so much, understanding that Brener is very durable. If he's coached right and he has high fighter IQ, he'll understand that. He could slow the pace of this fight down, but he'll use his wrestling. He'll solidify rounds, and I just got to be on the Orolbai side of things. I'm high on this dude, and I like him to win a decision. Okay, now we go over to the betting line. He opened up as a -230. And then, I don't know if this is accurate. He touched +190. That's crazy. I don't know if that was some type of glitch. This was on BetUS. He's now -280. Let's take a look and see if that was going on with any of the other sports books out there. And you don't see that on Bovada, just up in the -200s. In the -200s, I think that was some kind of glitch. Let's see what else we can find here real quick. Just curious. Yeah, that seemed to be a mistake there. He has been cruising in the -200s. I think you could definitely argue it's a little bit of a high line. You don't want to continuously overlook Brener. He's obviously dangerous. If he could stuff the takedowns and make this a brawl, his Muay Thai skills are dangerous. He has great cardio. He's durable. This fight could definitely have you at the end of your seat biting your nails if you parlay Orolbai. So this will be a fight that I'm just sitting back watching and enjoying. But I will be on the Myktybek Orolbai decision side of things. That will be my verdict for how I see this fight going. It'll be a good one. Iasmin Lucindo taking on Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Iasmin Lucindo, you love to see her here with Amanda Nunes, really the greatest women's mixed martial artist of all time, right? We got to be clear at that. Who's above Amanda Nunes as the best women's mixed martial artist of all time? At one time, you guys know I used to argue Valentina Shevchenko, but not with the way she's been ending the tail end of her career there. But I love to see Lucindo getting in work with Nunes here, because I think that Lucindo has some serious potential as far as the future goes for her. She is just 22 years old. I knew it as soon as I seen her UFC debut that she was the real deal, right? She took a loss there, but you understand that fighter she was facing in Iasmin Erceg is a very polished striker, and they went tit for tat there, and she was on the losing side of things there, but it was a very close fight. And we saw that both fighters were high caliber, especially for their age. Okay, so I remember as soon as that fight ended, I had both those fighters on my radar. Since that loss, she bounces back with 2 victories in a row, finished up Poliana Viana in her last fight, pulling off a submission. You'll love to see her showcasing some submission skills there as well, because she's a polished striker. Okay, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, what do you want me to say about her? 38 years old, fought for the belt way back in the day. There was a moment in time just a couple of years ago that I thought she was absolutely en route to retiring from the sport. She was on a 5-fight losing skid. Specifically, the Jessica Penne loss was the one that was alarming. All the other losses were against respectable level of opponents, but no disrespect to Jessica Penne, who I know from the grapevine, friends of friends, she's actually a great person. I've heard some really good things about her, but Jessica Penne, stepping away from the game, here and there. She's had her moments. She fought for the belt as well and was brutalized. Both women were brutalized against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, but things were looking rough for Karolina. That's the point I'm making. But now she's on a 4-fight winning streak going into this fight. But can we please note that you really dive into a Diana Belbita, Vanessa Demopoulos, Silvana Gomez Suarez, and Felice Herrig as she's entering retirement there right around that time. I'm not too high on the level of opponents here. I mean, you could say Demopoulos has good jiu-jitsu. Silvana Gomez Suarez is a hard-hitting fighter for women's mixed martial arts. But Iasmin Lucindo, even at the age of 22, is a much more complete fighter. And just the potential she brings into the cage is just so high. Also, if you're wondering how Lucindo has already taken 5 losses, she turned pro at a very young age, and she also was fighting in up a weight class, fighting in a division that she probably shouldn't have been fighting in, up in the flyweight division. She's a much more natural strawweight fighter, and she's hitting her stride here right now, man. She got in early, and she's rounding out her game, and she should be a step ahead of Karolina as this fight goes on. And I really expect her, if she wants to have this fight play out on the feet, which I think that it probably will, I think that she's going to bloody up Karolina. I think she's going to really bloody Karolina up. Karolina is a fighter that favors her striking as well, right? She's more of a Muay Thai based fighter, even though she's a well-rounded fighter. She'll engage in that type of affair, and I think that Lucindo will have plenty of time and moments to bloody her up and hurt her. Does she get a knockout? I mean, Lucindo is a talented striker. She knocks girls out, man, and half of her victories have come by way of knockout. I don't know if I would bank on that necessarily. Karolina's only been finished once via strikes out of 23 professional fights, but she is 38 years old. Maybe we do see a standing TKO. Let's go, baby. Florida Panthers goal. Let's go. About to take the series against the Lightning. Sorry, I had to say that real quick. We got this on the side over here. We're up 2-0 for any of my NHL fans out there, but sorry, I had to throw that out there. But Lucindo is going to land the mark here. She's going to bloody her up, and maybe she does get that TKO stoppage in the 2nd or 3rd round. I think that's something you might want to keep an eye on as we take a look at the odds, because as far as the money line goes, Lucindo is a big favorite. Right now on BetUS, she is a -420. She's a big favorite, and I understand that that's a high line, but she's going to get the job done there. I'm not necessarily going to push you towards throwing that in a 2-team parlay or targeting that straight up. I mean, you're not going to get really any return on that, but I do want to make sure that I'm clear that I feel pretty damn confident that Lucindo is going to have her way in this spot. I know she's young. I just don't see the avenue. I don't think that Karolina drags her into the deep waters and uses some type of grappling edge or something like that and uses her experience. I just don't see it. I think Lucindo is a step ahead all day here, has the crowd rooting her on. There's just so many angles that are pushing towards her way. And really, I think the question is does she get that TKO later in the fight or not? Headed over to the featherweight division, we got Joanderson, Brito taking on Jack Shore. And you guys, don't forget, we are powered by BetUS over here. Check the link in the description of this video. And if you guys want to make a deposit to BetUS, you guys will get a match of 125%. Please let me know if you guys do that. Please let me know. I'll have a special gift waiting for you guys as well. But as we enter the featherweight division, take note, right? Jack Shore jumped up to the featherweight division in his last fight and looked pretty good out there. Got a W. Now, it was against Makwan Americani, who a little bit of a flaky fighter, especially towards the tail end of his career. But Jack Shore, who spent the majority of his career over in the bantamweight division, coming up to the featherweight division and having some success. Now taking on Joanderson Brito. Brito is absolutely no joke, coming off a serious finish where he caught Jonathan Pierce in that ninja choke. Jonathan Pierce making a mistake pushing with the wrestling there. But great to see that Brito is showing different elements of his game, because we all know that he has fight-ending power in his striking. Showing that he has fight-ending ability with his grappling is going to do wonders for himself. Has a victory over Diego Lopez, which you guys remember that very fun fight in Dana White's Contender Series. It's kind of interesting looking at that matchup now and understanding how dope of a fight was going into that matchup there. So did take an L in his UFC debut against Bill Algeo. Now that was a fight where he was controlled down in the mat for over a whole round. 5 minutes and 2 seconds of control time for Bill Algeo. Algeo did reverse him down in the mat. I do believe that loss lit a fire under Brito's ass there. I think that he's been working on his grappling, working on his overall skill set, of course. And I think that as he becomes a more and more complete fighter, he's going to be as dangerous as ever, of course, right? He's dangerous, man. This guy has the striking, pulling off nasty ninja chokes and all that. If Jack Shore comes in sloppy and overly aggressive with his grappling, if he thinks he's just going to go out there and just take Brito down and try to drown him, he could run into a nasty sub. Okay, I do believe that. I think Brito is putting those types of attacks in his arsenal, and you have to be careful there. Now, on the feet, I think that Brito is going to be the much more dangerous striker as well. So if he could use his footwork, keep this fight standing, keep Shore off of him, I do believe that Brito can hurt Jack Shore in a major way. Now, we've never seen Shore finished via strikes. We've only seen him subbed. But, there's a first for everything, and Brito is the type of fighter that could finish anybody. He's finished almost half of his victories via knockout, so don't be shocked if he clips Shore with the big shot. I do want to say that Shore he's a good fighter, and he's good at what he does. He knows how to close the distance. He has high fight IQ, and if he's going to have success here, I think that he's going to try to drown Brito, try to take this fight to the later rounds and have success there. And there is potential for that to be the case. But all in all, I like being on the Brito side of things. I just think that since taking that loss in his UFC debut, he's really had things going, and I like the well-roundedness of his game. Fighting in Brazil with the crowd behind him, I think that there's a much more likelihood that he gets the nod if it goes to a decision, especially with him being a fighter that looks to land more damaging shots. Well, Shore will kind of try to drown you and control you a little bit more so. You guys know that's not really the best style with the way that the judges are scoring these fights nowadays as well. So that's another thing that pushes me towards the Brito side. So let's take a look at what kind of line we're talking about here. On the money line, Brito right now is a -150, which we did see this line as high as -170. So opening up at -164. It's been dipping around a little bit. -150, it's not too steep. But you do understand that Shore is a game fighter. He is a game fighter that could potentially do some things that we saw Bill Algeo do when he got the job done there. But I like being on the Brito side. Like I said, just has more things going his way. Give me Joanderson, Brito. I'm going to say he wins a decision, but don't be shocked if he stops Shore. But if Shore is hurt and whatnot, he might be able to close the distance, kind of waste some time, stifle Brito a little bit. But as it goes to the judges' scorecards, he still gets the job done there. So give me Brito via decision, but don't be shocked if we see a big strike landed by Brito, who has that big fight-ending ability in his hands. So an interesting fact, if you guys forgot, Paul Craig stated that he was going to retire at the end of 2022, right? Going into 2023, I remember he said that he was planning on retiring at the end of that year. And here we are in 2024. Dude's cutting down to the middleweight division and looking to scrap with everybody, even coming off devastating losses. Like he just took that L to Brendan Allen, where he was submitted in the third round, bloodied up as well. Now, before that, he did look good in the middleweight division, cutting down in weight, where he finished Andre Muniz. But Muniz has had some questionable performances as of recently. But I think that is an interesting backstory to Paul Craig. Paul Craig, you guys know what everyone talks about. I mean, it's worth quickly mentioning. I mean, this is a dude, definitely will take some brutal L's, but he's always game and somehow has finishes over two of the top three best fighters in the light heavyweight division. When it was crazy when you think about it, in the finish that he has over Magomed Ankalaev and over Jamal Hill, finishing both those fighters, even though the Ankalaev one a little fluky with 1 second left. But just understand he's dangerous. He's extremely dangerous when you're in his guard. His nasty jiu-jitsu. Now, Kaio is a fighter. He's very good. Another fighter representing the MMA nerds. He's a very solid fighter, but he's really not a fight finisher. I know he has a submission recently over Oleg Sejak, but in general, this dude's not a fight finisher. He's been a little boring to watch, but he's very good at what he does. And I'm curious if he's going to try to open up a little bit in this spot, as I do expect him to have moments where he could be on top of Craig, and Craig will be dangerous there, like we said. But if Kyle wants to open up, maybe he could rain down some ground and pound or try to set up his own sub. We've seen Craig submitted like Allen just did to him, and we've seen fighters rain down some nasty ground and pound on him. So that's something worth noting. We've seen Jimmy Crute pull off a sub against Paul Craig, and we also saw him submitted. A couple submission losses also ringing a bell to me. Let's run those back. He was also submitted. We talked about that. Yeah, Brendan Allen and Jimmy Crute. So I would like to see Kaio step on the gas here and look to get a finish. If he wants to get some more respect put next to his name, He needs to get a finish. I do believe that. If he goes out there and makes this a boring fight, just controls Paul Craig, he's going to be spending a lot of time working towards trying to push his way towards the top of the division. I mean, if he keeps getting victories, eventually, yeah, he will get those big fights, those big eliminator fights and whatnot, but it's going to take him a lot longer. I think that this is a good spot for him to try to open up and have success. Paul Craig is also a fighter. His striking's not the best. I think that if Kyle has been working on his striking, which it's not bad. He's light on his feet, has that karate type of style. He's light on his feet. Maybe he opens up and tries to drop Craig and finish him up with some strikes, make a big statement on a card like this. So just give you a little backstory on some important aspects in this matchup. I am going to be on the Kyle side of things. I just think that this is a bad stylistic matchup for Paul Craig. I think that Kyle can kind of nullify the threat of the BJJ that Paul Craig has. Again, we talked about how dangerous he is there, but Kyle should be able to shut down a lot of those attempts and then have his moments to put some damage on him there. So I think stylistically this is a tough matchup for Paul Craig. And maybe after he takes this L, I hope not, but maybe he starts to contemplate retirement maybe a little bit more seriously, as he will then have lost 4 of his last 5 fights. I don't know. I'm a Paul Craig fan. I hope that is not the case. But I will be on Kyle here. And let's take a look at the betting odds to see what we're talking about. Another big-time favorite. Another big Brazilian favorite at that as well. Kyle is a minus 550 favorite. At one point in time, he was a, this is a mistake there. He was never a dog odds there, but we've seen it touch 355. You could have got him a little bit lesser of a favorite, but still a high favorite. Kyle, a potential parlay piece if you're getting it in that minus 400 range. I do like him, and you guys know I worked with him, put some money on him in his last fight. That was over Abis Magomedov, delivered, controlled him in that spot there. In fact, excuse me, I think that was a straight money line play too, but I think we were on that line early. But still, I like Kyle to get the job done here. I think it's more of a question is, does he open up and try to get a finish here? And, I haven't really seen that from him. I'm going to say he kind of dominates Craig, gets a decision victory. Gotta lean that way. Here he is, the high-flying, electrifying Michel Pereira taking on Ihor Potieria, who, even though he's been losing fights as of recently, for the most part, I think that he's actually proven himself. Okay, and that's why he's getting a nice step-in spot like this. Michel Pereira was initially supposed to be taking on Makhmud Meredov. Meredov pulls out, in steps Potieria, and Potieria is deserving of somewhat of a showcase fight like this. I really do believe that. You take a look at even his losses. He is coming off a victory over Robert Brycek, who was a UFC newcomer at the time in that spot there, and people were kind of high on him coming out of Poland. But the Rodolfo Bellato fight, that fight was so exciting. It was very close. It was going back and forth, and Potieria almost had that fight there. Now, he was knocked out against Carlos Olberg, but really outclassed and aged Mauricio Rua, who I think at the time people were kind of wondering how that fight was going to play out. At least I was. I mean, yes, Potieria had a nice victory on Dana White's Contender Series, but the way he looked in his UFC debut against Nikolai Negumereanu was not good. And he seemed to have really sharpened things up going into the Hua fight, and just a majority of these fights that he's had since, even though he's been taking L's. He's a crafty dude. He's a durable fighter, I would say, for the most part. I mean, he takes damage a little bit here and there, but I would say when you see the type of fights that he's taking place in, he's taking some damage, and he's pushing through it for the most part. I could see him kind of weathering the storm from some of Pereira's stuff, and that could potentially be something that Pereira needs to watch out for. If Pereira does something similarly to what he did in the Tristan Connolly fight, I know that was a long time ago, but it's just worth bringing up. That Connolly fight back in 2019, that was a fight where he was throwing out all these wild type of attacks and didn't pace himself properly, and he gassed out in that fight. If he gasses out against Potieria, I think Potieria can easily take over this fight. Now, I'm not expecting that to be the case. And just also note the loss he took against Diego Sanchez. You remember he hit him with that illegal knee. He was completely outclassing him there. And since then, just whooping dudes up. Zalim Amadayov, K.S. Williams, Nico Price, Andre Fiallo, Santiago Ponzinibbio, Andre Petrosky, Michal Oleksiejczuk. I mean, he's really on a solid winning streak right now and should be on a huge, huge winning streak if you take into consideration those 2 losses that should have went his way. You just want to note that he needs to pace himself properly, and I think he's came a long way since the loss of against Connolly. You also take note that fight, I believe that fight was in the welterweight division, right? He used to fight in the welterweight division, so he's up in the middleweight division. He's filled into this weight class perfectly. He's still a huge middleweight fighter. Ihor Potieria is a fighter that's fought up in the light heavyweight division. He's came down and seems to be working for him as well. But all in all, I think that Michel Pereira is going to be the fighter that's landing the cleaner strikes. This dude moves so well in there. I think he lands the cleaner strikes. And even as this fight starts to get a little wild and they potentially go to war, yes, Potieria could be live there, but you got to be on the Pereira side of things. I think Pereira is just going to be the sharpshooter. He's going to land those big shots. And we've seen, even when Potieria had success in the cage, there's kind of that moment where he kind of makes more of a devastating mistake and he's finished up, or he's hurt bad. So I think that Pereira can find the mark in this fight. I think that he'll be quicker out there. I am really high on Pereira. I think that he's doing his thing right now, and I don't think that the hype and the momentum stops against Ihor Potieria. Even though Potieria takes an L here, in my opinion, I still think that Potieria has the potential to bounce back and still have a UFC career ahead of him. Okay, so I know he'll be taking a good amount of losses as of recently, but he's a promising dude. I don't expect him to go to the top of these divisions, to the top of this division, but I think he has the ability to hang around. I'll say that much. All right, so I am on Michel Pereira to get the job done. He's a massive favorite. He's a minus 550. He opened up as a minus 270 on BetUS. So major action coming in on him. And, let's see what they're talking about as far as Pereira getting a finish here. Pereira winning inside the distance is a minus 285. I'm definitely not seeing any value on that. I'm kind of liking dog odds on an over or a decision victory for Pereira. I think there's just more value there, especially when you're talking about a plus 500 on Pereira to win via decision. I think there's more value on a line like that. I understand the numbers are pointing more towards a finish, but especially because this fight's going to be crazy, we know it. But let's say that Potieria kind of clinches up and when he's hurt and can kind of weather the storm and let this fight play out a little bit longer, can hold his own. There's just more value on that type of specific method of victory bet, or that's a prop bet for this fight, in my opinion. And I am not crazy about targeting a minus 550 as a parlay leg. You would have had to have grabbed it anywhere from the minus 300 range down to potentially have value there, in my opinion. So it looks like Bogdan Guskov is fighting in back-to-back weeks here, coming off the big victory over Ryan Spann, and now taking on Vitor Petrino. Actually, that's Anthony Smith there, huh? The doppelganger Anthony Smith, who is at the end of the road here as far as his fighting career goes. I think obviously he still has a career ahead of him on the broadcast side of things, but cool dude is Anthony Smith taking on Vitor Petrino, a fighter that he has such a how should I say this, man? This guy's in the top 15 already at 26 years old. He has such a bright future ahead of him. You could just imagine. It's kind of like when you're an older fella like me now, 35, and you look back at someone just going into college or still in their high school days, and you're like, damn, what I would do to go back in time to those days. It's kind of that type of situation here. I'm sure Anthony Smith is saying, damn, what I would do to be 26 years old and know what I know now, or something like that. I mean, Vitor Petrino, he's going to have a wild ride ahead of himself. I think this guy is going to really make some noise in this division. So Vitor Petrino gets the victory on Dana White's Contender Series, has a beautiful knockout victory over Rodolfo Bellato, which is aged really good because Bellato's the truth. He's a solid fighter, right? And you think that this guy's maybe a little bit more of a one-trick pony, a big power puncher. It's really just not the case. I think that we've seen that over the last 4 fights. Only just 1 knockout victory in his last 4 fights. 2 decision victories, showing that the cardio holds up in the later rounds, showing that he has submission skills as well, has grappling skills. I think that his jiu-jitsu is very much underrated. Submitted Marcin Prachnio, which Prachnio has looked much better later in his career, so that victory even aged well, is aged even better. Vitor Petrino is a well-rounded fighter. He's a phenomenal athlete, and I think that this guy is really going to make some noise. This is a guy that could potentially be fighting for the belt one day. I know that that's a steep statement, but it's true. I think that there's potential for that. I think at the very least, he pushes towards the top 5 in this division. I'm high on him. And the main reason why I'm high, again, is not just the fact that he has such raw talent with his athleticism and his power and his striking, but when you watch him down in the mat, I think this is a guy that's turning over every stone, and he really wants to be a completely well-rounded fighter. So I think that's what we're going to see from him. And if you know where I'm going with this, this is a perfect fight for him. He goes in there, takes out the number 10th ranked Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith's at the end of the road here. He hasn't been durable recently. I think that we're going to see Pacino get that knockout victory once again. We talked about him not getting so many knockout victories as of recently. This is a spot where I think he does get a knockout victory. Anthony Smith was just finished by Khalil Roundtree. He was hurt very bad against Ryan Spann. That was a very close fight. And, I talked about it. You guys know I picked Bogdan Guskov to defeat Ryan Spann just recently. We called it. We said Ryan Spann is a front runner, but Anthony Smith couldn't even take advantage of Ryan Spann in the later rounds in that fight, and it was a very close fight. It was an official play of mine at dog odds. Could have went either way. Before that, he lost to Johnny Walker, took some damage in that fight, was knocked out against Magomed Ankalaev. Remember the damage he took to against Glover Teixeira. I mean, he's had a rough time as of recently. I know he sprinkled in a couple of victories here and there, but I just think that Anthony Smith is going to get hurt in this fight, and Vitor Petrino is going to take a lot of momentum away from the name of Anthony Smith, and you're going to start to see him get those big name fights. I say Vitor Petrino knocks Anthony Smith out in the first or second round in the early half of this fight, targeting more of the under 1.5 here. I mean, if you can get a decent line on that, which you're probably not going to be able to, but I'm eyeing that this fight plays out under 1.5 rounds, and you can actually get that with the plus sign next to it. All right, so there is some potential value there. Plus 165, I think there's a value spot there. You're also targeting Vitor Petrino to win this fight via knockout, which you can get plus 115 right now on BetOnline. Open up at plus 120. It's has a plus sign next to it, so there's some value there. Vitor Petrino will get the job done in this fight, and Anthony Smith is not gonna. He's not gonna. What's the term everyone's saying nowadays? Truth check him. Well, that's what I say. I say if someone passed the test, they got truth checked, fraud checked. He ain't gonna get fraud checked here. He will be truth checked once again, and he'll pass this test with flying colors. Vitor Petrino to get a knockout early on. Check out this dope picture of a young king of Rio, Jose Aldo, shredded up, nice and youthful there. Jose Aldo, obviously he's no spring chicken these days. He's making his return to the sport after a quick hiatus, a quick little retirement there. Jose Aldo, my favorite Brazilian fighter of all time. This dude has just been such a stud throughout the years. And, I made a post recently on my IG for who is the greatest featherweight of all time. And I kind of edged Volkanovski, man. But Volkanovski taking some recent losses as he gets up there in age too. And, we hold Aldo to the fire for his recent losses. Be it against high-level competition like Merab Dvalishvili and Piotr Jan, and he should have had the victory over Marlon Moraes. That was a bad decision to take a loss to Volkanovski there as well. But and Max Holloway, McGregor, of course, the McGregor one was crazy. But here's the thing: all of his losses against high-caliber opponents. But do you guys understand? And I'm sure a lot of you guys do. The work he was putting in the featherweight division. Over in the WEC, which was the pinnacle of the division. The UFC did not have the featherweight division, and he was on an absolute tear ever since he made his debut in 2008. He was just running through all these guys. Remember the flying knee he hit Cub Swanson with? A lot of you guys, about the Masvidal flying knee in Askren. Well, the real initial flying knee that played out like that was when he ran across the cage and just dropped Cub Swanson with that knee, and Swanson just shelled up. He was brutalized. I mean, I knew back then, I saw that fight live back in the day in 2009, and that's when he stood out to me. I already knew that he was a dope fighter, but when I saw that flying knee, that was it. I was big on Jose Aldo. I knew he was just moving differently out there. He followed that up with a knockout victory over Mike Brown. He defeated Uriah Faber. Remember, he brutalized Uriah Faber's legs, and I believe that was the no, it wasn't that fight. Excuse me, but he did dominate Uriah Faber there. Followed it up with a lot of other solid victories. But that was one of the last events that WEC put together. But they did have another one. But came into the UFC and then got right to work, just dominating everybody in the division. Of course, again, we talked about the McGregor loss. The McGregor loss was a tough one for him. But I just think that Aldo is right in the mix for the greatest featherweight of all time and one of the greatest champions of all time. So he makes this return. He's fighting a fighter in Jonathan Martinez, who is just an absolute primed fighter. I think you could say that he is in the prime of his career right now. He's 30 years old. He's on a nice winning streak right now. He's going out there. He's finishing dudes, finishing Adrian Yanez, finished Cub Swanson. So they have a little common opponent there that they finished, but at different times in Swanson's career. It's just an interesting side note is Jonathan Martinez throws some of the nastiest leg kicks in the game. We saw him brutalize Adrian Yanez's legs in that last fight. And Jose Aldo, we talked about that Faber fight. Jose Aldo has thrown some of the best leg kicks in the game that we've seen throughout the year. So I'm very interested to see who gets the better of the leg kicking game. Jonathan Martinez just has such a major edge in this fight, and that is that his body has a lot more mileage to give. He's going to be more durable here. Jose Aldo, you just have to wonder. There's a lot of question marks into Jose Aldo. What has he been doing with this layoff? Also, he's 37 years old. How does his body hold up? And if you want to play devil's advocate, though, let me just note that before he retired and had a couple of these little boxing matches, before he took a decision loss to Merab, he did have a 3-fight winning streak going on, and he had a 3-fight winning streak going on against respectable fighters like Marlon Vera, Pedro Munoz, and Rob Font. Okay, so I mean, he was still moving, man. He's lightning quick. He was still moving in those fights. He was outpointing them. Could he go out here and outpoint Jonathan Martinez? I do think he can. A prime version of Jose Aldo would whoop Jonathan Martinez. I say that confidently. A prime Jose Aldo is leaps and bounds above a Jonathan Martinez. Now, Martinez still has more to prove, but even then, I don't think he ever hits the ceiling of a Jose Aldo. I mean, no, he doesn't. But can he go out here and get a finish over an aged Jose Aldo? Yeah, I think he can get a finish here, and I'll pick him to win this fight in general. I just think that it's the responsible pick. As much of a Jose Aldo fan as I am, you cannot pick Jose Aldo here. I know it's in Brazil as well. If it goes to the judges' scorecards, if you can keep it close. Yes, there is an avenue for Jose Aldo to get a victory here, but I still have to settle in with the Martinez pick here. And wouldn't be surprised if he gets a late stoppage, but maybe more towards a decision victory. It's the crowd will be going crazy for Aldo. The judges will almost be influenced to go Aldo's way, but it's just the damage that Martinez will do, the big moments that he'll have will be a little bit too much for the judges to even try to make a move like that, in my opinion. So Jonathan Martinez opened up at a -112. It was essentially a pick'em line at one point in time. A lot of actions came in on him. He's a -160. I think that's understandable. I still hesitate a little bit just because if Jose Aldo's moving right out there, if he's durable, and then the crowd influences the judges' scorecards, I'm not sure if I want a -160 tag. Maybe it comes back a little bit. You want to get it. Maybe there's some value if it's like 140 and down. But I will settle in with a Jonathan Martinez pick here on the money line. No matter how you spin it, I don't know. I'm not crazy about the -160. I'll say -150 and down. I see some potential value in Martinez. I'm going to settle in with the Martinez pick here. And maybe the great Jose Aldo makes me eat my words there. And I would be very happy if he does, because I'll be rooting Aldo on in this fight. Here we go. We hit the main event. Pantoja taking on Erceg. Erceg getting that title shot after just 3 victories and only 3 fights in the UFC. We are powered by BetUS. Check the link in my description. You sign up through it, you get a 125% match there. Make sure you guys let me know if you do sign up through my link so I can give you guys a little gift as well. All right, guys. Erceg, man, I think people are starting to come around the more they dive into the tape, or the more they really understand what this dude's about, as far as him being a serious threat to Pantoja. I think the line kind of says it in a way too, because Pantoja is a proven champ right now. I mean, this dude, he's the best flyweight fighter on planet Earth. I feel, at least right now, I feel pretty strong in that opinion. Now, we'll see after this night if that's the case. But for Steve Erceg to be, which we're going to jump over to the line right now, for Steve Erceg to only be a +160 on some of these lines, with Pantoja just being a 2-1 favorite on some of these lines, a -200 over a fighter that's so new to the UFC, just has 3 fights in the UFC, is not completely proven, over a fighter that is so proven in Pantoja, 27 victories, going out there, defeating Brandon Royval, Brandon Moreno, Alex Perez, which the Perez submission even aged better, submitting Brandon Royval in the fight before that, defeating Manil Cape, who's a stud, also has a knockout over Matt Schnell. I just think that right now, I feel pretty confident saying Pantoja is the best flyweight in the world. We'll see how that holds up. He's 34 years old, but a danger striker. His jiu-jitsu and wrestling, all that. He's such a well-rounded fighter. Has been tested. And, a little bit of an issue I have, though, with this matchup is Pantoja in his fights as of recently, man, he's just been marching forward, and he's put himself in danger quite a bit as he looks to implement his will against his opposition. And Steve Erceg is a sniper. We saw that in the Matt Schnell fight. Shout out to my boy Matt Schnell. But Matt Schnell absolutely devastated in the second round, flatline there. Besides that, if Pantoja rushes the grappling, which we saw him do against Moreno a lot of times, he put himself in some vulnerable positions. Erceg is a fighter that really made his bones pulling off subs. He's a nasty BJJ player. His striking is extremely caught up to his grappling. But, this is a guy early in his career that was just submitting dudes left and right down under. So, submitting guys like Shannon Ross when Shannon Ross was a much more respectable fighter, a younger fighter, bursted on the scene, took out David Dvorak and Alessandro Costa, then knocked out Matt Schnell. It's just he passes the eye test. When you watch the way he moves, he's very methodical. He's very technical. He's a very technical fighter, and that's what worries me a little bit for Pantoja, because Pantoja, as dangerous as he is, as well-rounded as he is, he does put himself in vulnerable positions and leaves little holes where fighters can kind of capitalize on them. And I could see a guy like Erceg capitalizing against Pantoja. I'm so tempted to pick Steve Erceg in this spot here. I'm telling you guys, I'm very tempted to pick Erceg in this spot. I feel like it could be a little bit of an irresponsible pick, though. As I stated, Pantoja being the best flyweight fighter right now, just so well-rounded, fight in his home country, defending his belt. I don't think he's going to be able to use the wrestling like he used against Brandon Royval just to control him there. Erceg's jiu-jitsu is nasty. Oh, man. I think I'm going to do it, guys. Whew. You guys, am I going to do this right now? I was on Pantoja. I've been bouncing back and forth with my thoughts on this fight, and I'm going to settle in with the Erceg pick. I'm settling in with the Erceg pick. That's it. I'm picking Steve Erceg, man, to shock the world here. He's going to do something similarly to what Alex Pereira did, come into the UFC, wreak havoc really quickly, and snatch this belt up. This fight's going to go on, or his fight is scheduled for 25 minutes, which gives Erceg a lot of time to find an opportunity in this fight. I like his youth here, and I like it. I like Erceg here. I like the value next to his name, as well as you can catch him on some lines as high as a plus 193. If Pantoja's not, if he just tries to push with the wrestling and whatnot and just tries to bombard Erceg, man, Erceg has nasty jiu-jitsu. I'm going to take Steve Erceg to get the job done. And it could age horribly, or it could age bad, or it could age great. We got to take some risks, some chances here. I think some of you guys will respect this pick. Some of you guys will probably poke at it. And it is what it is, though. It is what it is. I'm going to pick Steve Erceg to potentially get a finish in this fight, maybe later on. But I think that he does enough to get the job done. That's a goal, baby. Right as we cap off the main event, it's 3-1 Panthers. And I got Steve Erceg getting the job done with the value on his name. And I think that he is potentially live to get a finish in this fight. Let's take a quick look at some Erceg finishing props to win inside the distance, plus 235, open up at plus 300. Ooh, maybe some value there in a 25-minute fight. But also even just to win a decision, plus 450. Maybe you kind of settle in on where you want to be there and try to get a really juicy line. But even then, you can get him still almost at 2-1 odds. So maybe you just settle in with that money line. Pick Steve Erceg to become the new flyweight champion of the world. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up UFC 301. Got to leave you guys with some parting words. Leave you guys with something I was thinking about the other day. I forgot exactly who it was that kind of put this in my mind, but I saw the way they were moving, the way they were living, and it was very admirable. But just the gist of it, man, I was locked in and I was focused in on, and I saw the way they were moving, and I was like, damn, that's how you do it. It was somebody that was in a very powerful position, someone that's done a lot of significance with their life, but in a real positive way. I think it was an athlete, but still, they were kind of talking about just being a good person, though, with that. It's not just about having the accolades and having the accomplishments in life. It could be anything in life, right? It doesn't matter if it's just sports, just anything in life, any type of accomplishments. But intertwining that with being a good person, sometimes people just kind of overlook that. Sometimes people are in tough times in their life and they really don't care about being a good person. They want to have all the accolades. They want to get. They want to take and feel good about themselves. But think about the bigger picture too, the big picture, man. I know you could kind of simplify life and dumb it down and say, none of this even matters. If you kind of have that pessimistic look, it doesn't matter. One day I'll just be buried in under dirt or whatever. But if you kind of think deeper, if you could kind of visualize it and see it, man, if you could be a person that's very accomplished, but be a solid, good person that makes good choices in life. If you see someone doing something bad to a weak person or whatever, and you step in and you could help out. And I know that sounds corny, man. I know, because at one time in my life when I was younger, if I heard someone say that, I'd be like, I don't, when I was going through hard times in my life, I'd be like, that's nonsense. I used to be maybe a bad person in some aspects at times, but I see it so clearly now. And I try to strive to be that type of person, have goals, do what you want to do and all that, but also be a good person. And you'll feel good about yourself. Take a step back, analyze it, man. Be that solid person. When your book's written and maybe nobody reads your book, but you know what your book was as you're at the end of your roads, right? You know what your book was. You can't hide from yourself. And maybe you take some pride in that and you get one life. You know what I'm saying? Like, be a good person, make good decisions. And, this blessed life that we all have, we all make this world a better place if we all make those types of decisions. And it's just solid, man. Be on the good side of things, not on the bad side of things, right? Why not? It's good, man. It's better. All right, guys. So I'll leave you with that. And we'll sign out. Hope you guys all have a profitable event for UFC 301. And I told you guys, as promised, some big things coming here. I'm always working on these different aspects. And I hope you're following me on my social media, because you're going to see a lot of that there. But you'll also see it on the YouTube shorts. I'm working on some things here. It's going to be fun. All right, guys. Signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.